There are other move orders, but usually the Urusov Gambit comes out of the bishop's opening. Your opponent plays the principled knight f6, the Berlin defense, no, not that one. But in this position, white plays d4, this is the Ponziani Gambit, and the Urusov Gambit happens after they take our pawn, the best move. But in this position, there are a couple of ways our opponent can go wrong, the most common of which is taking the wrong pawn here. This is a mistake because after we take their pawn, the knight is running out of escape squares here, and there are all kinds of blunders your opponent can play in this position, starting with the most common move, bishop c5. The move here is queen d5, forking checkmate and their knight. And if you look at the database, most people will just take here. And after king f1, we're winning a piece. Back to our starting position, our opponent takes the pawn and we take on e5. We went over bishop c5. Next, we're going to talk about what happens if they threaten checkmate. At first, maybe this looks scary, but white can definitely secure an advantage here by starting with the move bishop e3. And the most common move is a pretty funny mistake. With an average rating of 1655, your opponent thinks they're absolutely cooking with knight takes f2, opening up a discovered attack on our bishop. But we have a desperado tactic. With all reliable, bishop takes f7. Unlike us, they're in check, so they have to take the piece, and we can capture back while retaining our castling rights. And if they try to win our g2 pawn, this will usually result in some kind of queen trap, like this for instance. And we'll go over a couple more common tactics and traps that come out of this position, starting with queen e7. The move to remember here is queen e2. After all, we've already developed our light bishop. Here, the most common move with 47% of games is a complete blunder. Queen takes e5. After all, we have f3, attacking the pinned knight. Another common blunder you'll run into in this position is d5. Here we have two attackers, so we just take with our bishop. The most common move blunders a queen after we hit him with an all-reliable sacrifice. Knight takes f2 doesn't work. Bishop f5. Blunders the pawn. Obviously a very difficult position to play for our opponent, so that's why knight takes e4 is considered bad. There are all kinds of tactics, and white always ends up with an advantage. The final moves I wanted to talk about in the Ponziani Gambit. Before we move on to the main line, the Urusov Gambit, are knight c6 and d6. First of all, if they play d6, that's considered a mistake because we can take and then convert into a better endgame. That's why you'll almost never see d6 at the more advanced levels. And the final common line you'll see is knight c6. Here, instead of the ancient move d5, I would highly recommend just playing knight f3. Taking on e4 is still considered bad for the exact same reasons, and should they take the other pawn, we'll actually transpose into familiar territory in the Urusov Gambit. And you may notice in the Elite Chess database over here, it's referring to this position as a Scotch Gambit. The Urusov Gambit is very transpositional with the Scotch Gambit, so if you're already a Scotch Gambit player, learning the Urusov Gambit can be a great way to get to the same positions without needing to study as much theory. And with that, we're ready to move on to the main line. This is the Urusov Gambit. Black takes on d4, and the move that 98% of masters play is knight f3. Here, the move knight c6 transposes into the Scotch game, the position we were just looking at, but I'd like to go from most to least common, starting with knight takes e4. This is a very common line. We'll start by capturing with our queen on d4, and this position is already extremely dangerous for our opponent. In fact, I would consider the second and third most common moves both blunders. First of all, bishop e7 lets us castle and gain a lot of tempo. The other common blunder, knight d6, is for a very similar reason. We can castle and put our opponent in a lot of trouble. We quickly look at the Masters database. There actually are some master level players who have fallen for that one, with an average rating of 2248, but 96% of masters play the correct move, knight f6. This is considered the most accurate response. The best move here is to develop our other knight. The most natural move is knight c6. We'll bring our queen to the side of the board, create a battery with our bishop, and look how far ahead we are in development here. We can already castle either way, but usually we'll be castling long and attacking. That's how I'd recommend dealing with knight c6. This is a theoretical line even played at the master level, but I would say we still get a ton of compensation for our pawn. Bishop e7 is the most common move at the top level, and we're going to play it the exact same way, starting with bishop g5, and then whether they castle or play knight c6, we're going to once again swing our queen out to h4, and this can lead to all kinds of crazy attacks. We're going to castle long and attack on the king side. The final line to look at from this position is c6. In this line, they're preparing d5 to kick our bishop, which will want to move to d3. We'll start with the same move here, bishop g5, creating a pin. And here we'll be playing for these same ideas. Queen h4, creating a battery, castling long, attacking on the king side. But it is important to remember, if they start with d5, it's important to remember to start by castling long, pinning this pawn to checkmate. Then you can play for your normal plan with queen h4, maintaining a pin, and then once they've castled, you can come back to d3 to attack on the king side. And that's how we handle it if they capture on e4. Next up is knight c6. This is the most common move played by grandmasters, and realistically, we have a couple of options here. We've transposed into the Scotch Gambit, which means if we castle, we are offering up the double Scotch Gambit, and should they accept that, we can play knight c3, the absolutely insane Nachmanson Gambit, but I already have a video out on that. So instead, in this video, I'm going to talk about the much more reputable e5, the advanced variation, and the Scotch Gambit. This is one of the main lines of the Scotch Gambit. Here, queen e7 is a blunder, because we can castle, threatening the pin. So our opponent either has to move their knight or play d5. d5 is considered the best option, because knight e4 and knight g4 can go very wrong. Let's start with knight g4. Here, bishop takes f7, our all-reliable sacrifice unfortunately does not work, because after knight g5, and they retreat their king, they have a6, and then d6, and suddenly their king is looking perfectly safe, and we no longer have a light bishop. So instead, it's considered better to castle. Should they capture here with either knight, by the way, that's obviously a blunder, because after all the captures, we have this pin. We're threatening f4, and that's a very common way you can find some quick wins. Bishop c5 does transpose us into the Max Longa attack. The moves played here at the master level include bishop f4, bishop takes f7, and my favorite, a novelty from 2011, and the move I'll be recommending in this video, c3. First of all, they can't capture our pawn on c3. For the same reason they can't capture the second pawn in the Evans Gambit, we have an all-reliable sacrifice, bishop takes f7, and then you have two different ways to win your piece back. Let's say they don't make that mistake and instead castle. This is also a mistake, because after capturing back, we have a huge center. We're going to be able to kick this knight back to the h6 square, where we can open up their opponent's king, and our opponent's minor pieces are looking exceptionally useless. It's an all-around good time. So hopefully I'm selling some of you on c3 and this line in the Max Longa attack. Let me know in the comments if you guys want a full video on the Max Longa attack, but if I haven't already sold you enough, well, the first two most common moves here are considered mistakes. The third most common move played on Lichess, knight g takes e5, is a blunder, because after we capture and then capture again, we're going to start by pinning the knight, just like before, except this time we're threatening a fork with c takes d4. Should they play the most common move, d6, that's exactly what we'll do. Next, let's come back to the advanced variation and the Scotch Gambit. Let's talk about the other square they can retreat their knight to. Let me know in the comments, by the way, if you guys like the move arrows. I never know whether to have them on or not. If they play knight e4, the best way to secure an advantage out of the opening is to start by castling. The idea is that after castling, we're threatening rook e1. For example, if they play bishop c5, we can play rook e1, and they're losing a piece unless they play d5, which we can take en passant, and then f5, which completely opens up their king. They're blocked from castling, will develop with tempo, and attack on the king side of the board, and this will be the way that we punish all of the inaccurate play from our opponent. The two theoretically sound moves here for black are d5 and bishop e7. First of all, bishop e7, we're still just going to play rook e1, getting our rook to a semi-open file with tempo. And then after d5, we once again take en passant, but they're not pinned anymore, so they can capture with knight. And then here, actually, bishop d5 is considered more accurate than bishop b3 because they're up a pawn and this pin is a pain if you're not careful. But the average rating of this position is already well over 2,000, so I'd say it's fairly unlikely you run into this at the club level. Back to the advanced Scotch Gambit. We've covered both knight jumps now. We've covered the common blunder, queen e7. Finally, it's time to talk about the main line, which is d5. The only good move after d5 is pinning their knight with bishop b5. Afterwards, the theoretical line goes knight e4. We take the hanging pawn on d4, adding another attacker to the knight. Bishop to d7. We capture with our bishop, reason being they want to capture back with their b-pawn. Now materials equal and we castle. Bishop c5. Then the final move of theory that you really need to know, against the Italian game Scotch Gambit Max Longa attack, 3 different openings in one, is going to be f3, kicking our opponent's knight. After f3, the moves are fairly natural. We'll want to reinforce our knight, kick their knight, finish development, king h1 looks good. And for being up against the ultra-theoretical line, I would say we ended up with a very solid position, without even being down a pawn. Now we've covered knight takes e4 and knight c6. Next, we're going to take a look at bishop c5 in the Urusov Gambit. This is an option that's almost never played at the master level. Let's find out why. Just like in the line with knight c6, we're going to advance our pawn to e5. The only good move here, only found by 16% of players, is going to be d5. They retreat their knight to e4. The best move is actually going to be bishop d5 because it blocks d5. This will once again force them to open up their king, or lose a piece. Queen e7, of course, we just castle, threatening to go rook e1, and that's why d5 is considered the only good move here. Let's go over it. It's important to remember to take their knight on f6. Then after they capture your bishop, instead of capturing, start by delivering a check with queen e2. They'll be forced to block it with their light bishop. Afterwards, we're going to capture on g7. Again, this is a very forced line. Bishop g5, attacking their queen. And then there's a fun line here that comes from the most common move, queen to d5, but we can start with knight c3. After all, if they capture, we can play rook d1, pinning their queen to Paul Morphy's opera mate. As you can tell, this is a very niche line with a lot of theory, but as long as you remember queen e2 check and then bishop to g5, you should be doing completely fine. Our next line in the Urusov Gambit is bishop b4 check. Here we are going to play c3. Your opponent will capture, and we'll want to keep the initiative by capturing with our b-pawn. This will give us time to kick our opponent's knight with e5. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you're finding it helpful. It helps me be discovered in the algorithm. But next up, we have the move d6. This is a very solid option, and in this position, we're going to do what we always do on this channel. We're going to ignore the engine entirely, and sticking with the spirit of the Urusov Gambit, we're going to play the very interesting knight g5. Every move here from our opponent, except for d5 and bishop to e6, is going to be completely losing. And regardless of which move they choose, our opponent is walking on a tightrope here, and as you'll see, there are a ton of traps we've set up. Starting with d5, our opponent plays d5. You want to remember to always capture with your pawn. Now, if your opponent played d6, they're probably a very solid player, and they're going to notice that they have two attackers on this pawn here on d5, and we only have one defender. Perhaps they can get the pawn, and like 55% of players here on chess, our opponent plays knight takes d5. Now, if you've ever played the fried liver attack, you can probably see what's wrong about this position for black. Our bishop is now x-raying the f7 square, which is already attacked by our knight, and the most accurate move here is going to be castling. The reason for that is they no longer have bishop b4 check. And after a move like bishop to e7, we can play the fried liver attack idea, forcing our opponent to capture on f7, and then winning the piece back. Besides d5, the other playable move here is bishop e6. Here we can take their bishop with our knight, opening up a diagonal to their king. We take our pawn back. If they capture on e4, that's a blunder because we have queen h5 check. They have to play queen e7. Then you have plenty of good options here, but I like bishop c5, and then blocking again with the bishop, because it sets up for a pretty nice trap here. So that's d6, very solid, but our opponent has to play extremely carefully. The final common options for our opponent, which I'll cover very quickly, are d5 and c5. First of all, d5. As I'm sure you can guess, we'll want to capture with our pawn. If they capture with their knight, which 68% of players do, the vast majority, we can castle and then capture the pawn back with our queen. Following the most common line, bishop e7, we capture the pawn back, threatening to take on d5, knight f6, and we can force a very comfortable endgame, where our opponent only really has one piece developed. Their king isn't safe, and we've already castled. Back to d5, we of course capture. And the final thing I'll cover here is the correct move, which is bishop b4 check. We'll of course block with our c-pawn, but this time if they capture, we're not going to capture back with our b-pawn, we're going to deliver the check and win this free piece. After all, the f6 square is taken. So that's how you handle d5, not very often played at the top level. Final move to cover is going to be c5, and I think I've covered this exact position on my channel before actually, maybe in my center game video. But what you do is you castle and then play c3. Here we're threatening knight e5 and knight g5, attacking f7. This is what you'll do if they play anything but d5. This even includes knight takes e4, because we have a very nice tactic. If they block with d5, we can take with our knight. They're forced to capture back, and we deliver the check. We get their king into the open, and then we can even win the piece back if we want. Like this. Now let's say they do find d5, you'll always want to take with your pawn. Again, recapturing with your knight is a mistake. For the same kind of tactical motif, we have knight to g5, threatening to sacrifice on f7. And it's the exact same tactics, but say they find d5, and also aren't one of the players, the 86% of players that take with their knight, which is a blunder, and instead they play the correct move, bishop e7, getting ready to castle. We would play c3, offering them our pawn. We should have a huge lead development here, and that's every single line you need to know in the Urusov Gambit. Let me know what to cover next.